welcome to episode 1 of my new podcast, I Don't Think We Talk Enough About. I'm so excited to welcome my first guest, Nicole Vignola, who is a neuroscientist, corporate consultant, author and speaker committed to making neuroscience tangible for the masses. She has an established platform which reaches millions, providing her audience with practical tools and science-backed methods to improve mental health, optimise reflexes and reach peak mental performance to enhance their daily lives. With 12 years of coaching experience, Nicole has a neuroscience degree and a master's in Organisational Psychology. This conversation focuses on the effects of heartbreak on the brain, something I really don't think we talk about enough. Nicole shares with me what actually happens to the heart in heartbreak, how to heal from heartbreak, what not to do in heartbreak, and how to choose improving yourself instead of choosing self-destructive behaviours. This episode is for anyone who has experienced heartbreak through loss, grief and breakups. But if this episode brings up difficult emotions for you, please pause, reach out to someone you feel safe with, and offer yourself some much needed compassion. And of course, if you can, please come back to this episode as Nicole and I do discuss ways to help you heal. I really hope you enjoy. So Nicole, welcome to I Don't Think We Talk Enough About. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, you're so welcome.
It's so nice to meet you in person.
I feel the same.
Yeah, I know.
Because I followed you for so long on Instagram as Nicole Neuroscience.
Yes.
And it's just so lovely to finally meet you in the flesh. It's gorgeous.
I think we've been following each other since we were both quite small on Instagram. We've both kind of grown together, which has been so nice. Like you've been my friend all along.
It's so lovely to hear. And I mean, your Instagram's really grown, hasn't it? You've got so many followers now, over 400,000.
Yes.
And what I love about your Instagram is you give real science-proved advice, but in a way that feels so accessible.
Good. Oh, thank you. That was the goal.
No, it's come across, and I'm not surprised.
Thank you.
You deserve all of that success.
Thank
you
you.
really do. And talking about success, your brand new book.
Rewire, yes.
Amazing.
Thank
We
you.
have it here in the studio today, and we're going to talk about it a lot.
So excited.
Incredible. It came out yesterday.
Yes,
And
officially.
do you want to give me the good news?
It's #1 bestseller on Amazon at the moment.
That's just amazing. That's amazing.
It is really good. And the audiobook is #2, but now I'm flexing.
Oh, that flex away. That's incredible, isn't it? Well done.
Thank you.
Well
I'm
done.
so excited.
I'm not surprised. It's a brilliant book. I was lucky enough to get an advance copy of it, and I read it literally in 2 days.
Oh my gosh.
And I was nodding all the way through. And
so
obviously,
emotional.
I'm a therapist and you're a neuroscientist. But what was so beautiful about it is all of your advice you gave was the things that backing up what I work with my
good.
clients. And I loved that.
Good.
It was the reason behind why we give the advice we do
Oh, I
as
love that.
therapists. But it's a beautiful book, and I love your journey,
Thank
Nicole. And I wondered, I know this podcast is I Don't Think We Talk Enough About, and I really wanted to talk about heartbreak and the effect on the brain. And I know when I put the question out to my Instagram community around doing an interview with a very special guest on heartbreak, did they have any questions? I was inundated with, sadly, so much heartbreak out there in the community. And it felt like a really raw and really live issue that perhaps we're not talking about enough. But I wondered whether, before we get into the nitty-gritty of heartbreak and the brain, you would like to share a bit about your journey?
Yes, well, I actually do talk about my own journey in the book, and I went through a very hard time. I was in a very traumatic relationship, and he dumped me 3 days into moving to a new city. I was going to study neuroscience at the University of Bristol, so it was all very new. He was supposed to come with, and then he didn't, and then new friends, well, no friends actually, new environment, but it was exactly what I needed. Except I talk about in the book where I had sort of temporary heart failure. We call it heartbreak syndrome.
Yes.
And my heart gave up. Luckily, the PhD scientist that was in the lab was a cardiologist. Well, he was studying cardiology.
Okay.
And
Fortunate.
Yes, because I thought I was having a heart attack. I literally dropped to the floor and thought I'm dying. And he said, I don't think you're dying. I then went to go get an ECG, and they said, no, it wasn't a heart attack. It was a very severe version of a panic attack, which is called heartbreak syndrome. And what it is a temporary weakening of the heart wall. So I was quite literally heartbroken. Yes.
That sounds so traumatic for you. I had no idea it could cause that level of pain. And actually in the book you talk about it being very similar to the pain associated with breaking a bone.
Yes. So,
is that right?
Yes. The heartbreak syndrome is, similar to having a heart attack, but breakups in general can be as painful as breaking a bone. Now, I've never broken a bone, but I would imagine it is excruciating. Yes. I can't even imagine what that must feel like, but I've definitely been through heartbreak and it's horrible.
I'm so sorry.
Oh,
that
no,
sounds
don't.
Awful.
Don't
But
apologise.
you're here now,
yes.
and you've written a book about it.
Yes, I have.
You're going to help so many people. And I wonder whether we don't talk enough about that real pain of heartbreak.
Yes.
Do you want to just give me a little bit of or the listeners, a little bit of an idea about what actually happens in heartbreak syndrome?
Yeah, so in heartbreak syndrome, there's a weakening of the heart wall. It's caused by intense stress, which can mimic a kind of heart attack.
Okay.
The recovery's fairly quick, depending. You'll probably be monitored by doctors, but I didn't. They said that I would be fine. Just my resting heart rate was sort of sitting at about 110. I was in the lab doing physiology. We were doing physiology, and my sort of friend was kind of giggling like, "You're going to spontaneously combust because your heart rate's sitting at 110." And I was thinking, oh my gosh, I'd lost so much weight, but I was eating normally. But it was just my resting heart rate was so high that I was obviously burning through all the calories. So it was intense. But knowing what I know now and what I got to learn at the time as well, it was actually quite enlightening. And I know that I'm sort of jumping the gun, but I do believe that there's a part of us that we learn from experiences, and we'll tap into that at the end. I know there's a question around that that I really want to rein home the point that I think I'm not upset that any of this happened. If anything, I'm grateful that it has, and I hope that anyone listening hopefully reaches that same level of kind of acceptance and ability to see that the world is teaching us oftentimes, and we can learn from these experiences. Obviously, I don't wish anyone to have a heartbreak syndrome, but if you have this,
But the reality is people are.
Yes.
And they're perhaps not talking about it.
Exactly. And we don't, and when you don't know about it, I think that can be very scary.
Oh, God,
I think that knowledge is power when you understand why things are happening, what the mechanisms are, what's going on in your brain. Every time I put out a post about a breakup, I get comments, I feel seen. I'm so glad. I can see there's a way out. I kind of have an understanding now. And we get pulled out of that kind of ruminative thinking of there's no end, there's no hope, there's no light at the end of the tunnel. And information, knowledge, and understanding can really help you see that it's going to change one day.
And that's what you do so beautifully in Rewire.
Thank you.
You really talk through what's happening and the steps. And I feel like there's so much information in there that I think, why don't I know that already? Why don't people know that already? Why aren't we taught this to understand our bodies at a much deeper level, as opposed to just trying to get through without the information?
Yes.
And you go through this beautifully. And what you talk about a lot in the book is around, actually there's a couple of things I want to come to before I go on to the chapter. There was a bit you talk about in the chapter, endings, grief and loss.
Yes.
And you talk about the brain and the memory and the autobiographical memory and the coming back to focus on the tiny details of a relationship and how that can be so damaging for our healing journey.
Yeah, so we've seen in neuroscientific studies that parts of the brain that are responsible for that mind-wandering, pondering, autobiographical memories, those areas are exacerbated in activity, which means that it's the reason why you can go down memory lane trying to find ways to, adjust. What could I have done different? It's this kind of loop type thinking where you get stuck thinking that you could have made things different to get a different outcome. Now, the brain has an error detection area, and it loves to know what to do and what not to do in future occurrences. The problem is that we can't change the past, but we can use that to our advantage to know what to not do in the future. We generally tend to want to fix what could have been and what should have been, but we can change that kind of narrative to say, okay, this is how it went. What do I not want in the future? I now have a database of information of where things went wrong, what I loved about this person, what I hated about this person, and then I'm going to carry the positive attributes into my next relationship and hopefully eliminate the ones that maybe you didn't like. And I think that we can use it to our advantage.
We can, and as you're talking about that, I'm thinking we have to be so intentional with those choices, don't we? Because you're right, the natural ability or the natural function of the brain is to go to the
correct.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
And what you're saying there is a way, and I think in the book you talk about neuroplasticity.
I say that, I always go, I was just saying, I think, I know.
I know you said. I know. You definitely said. I read it and I circled it. You talked about neuroplasticity.
Yes.
Do you want to just give, in a nutshell, what neuroplasticity is?
Yes.
You explained it so well, but
Thank you.
neuroplasticity is?
Yes, so neuroplasticity is our ability to reshape and restructure our brain to create new pathways and undo the ones that are no longer serving us. So what that means is that we can adopt new habits and behaviors and thought patterns, types, ways of thinking, and undo the ones that we don't want. So we can get rid of habits. Now, we can't create new neurons. That's neurogenesis, but we can create new synapses, and synapses communicate with one another in the brain. So if you have a particular way of communicating in the brain, so you normally go down this negative route, that's the trajectory that you've always taken, the route that you've always taken, the one that's more traveled, it's going to feel easier to want to go down that route. But you can change. It just takes a little bit of effort, a little bit of repetition every single day to carve out a new path, so that eventually you get to this kind of crossroad and you think, okay, well, that's the path I've always taken, and that one's the one that feels nice, but I can go this way. And eventually this new path will be the one that's automatic.
I love the way you explained that. And in the book you explained it, I think I'm right, that you explained it as a dirt track.
Yes.
Moving, so the new path being like a dirt track.
Yes.
So it doesn't feel so safe.
Yes.
It doesn't feel so well trodden
Yeah.
or known or familiar.
Yes.
And then eventually that dirt track turns into
A tarmac highway.
a tarmac highway. And that visual for me was brilliant.
Oh, good.
And I think that will help so many people, that
Yes.
trust that
Yes.
it will become that tarmac.
Well, you kind of build it brick by brick,
Yeah.
you know, and you eventually have a path that is yours.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And you talk a lot about choice
Yes.
in the book, and I think that's really important. Another part I wanted to really talk about was the neurochemical changes
Yes.
in the brain through heartbreak. And I think that part of the book is fascinating and will help so many people understand. Do you want to talk a little bit here about dopamine?
Yes.
And I also want to come to another bit about dopamine and ghosting as well
Yes.
in a sec, because you
Yes.
did that beautifully on your Instagram.
Amazing, yeah.
And it really resonated. And I know it will for many.
Yes, I've
But
got
if we come,
goosebumps.
I know it was such a powerful
you.
video. But coming back to dopamine,
Yes.
what happens?
So, when you spend time with someone for a long time or even a few months, they get ingrained in your neuronal pathways, you know, the way that you walk out of the door and call them first thing, or you make 2 coffees in the morning instead of 1, and it's something that becomes part of your pattern of neuronal firing. So when that person is removed from your life, it can be that your brain kind of goes through a withdrawal period where it has to reestablish a new life without this person. And what tends to happen is dopamine levels drop, serotonin levels drop, but I'll focus on dopamine first. And what that means is that you can find yourself in a reward type seeking behavior where you're either trying to, let's say it's a breakup, you're trying to check up on them, you're trying to check up on whether they have a new partner, you're trying to the thing I want to mention as well is that in the book I've discussed the loss of a job, the loss of a dream, an idea that you thought you would have had. And I think that that's so important, because sometimes we mourn the life we should have had. You know, something happens.
Real grief. Real grief.
There's real grief in that. And, you know, of course, varying scenarios will have varying outcomes. But for example, with a breakup, if you keep reinforcing this behavior of let me go and check up on them, let me try find out what they're doing, let me text them to see if they'll get a reply. Now, when we text someone, dopamine behaves in a way that is either a goal-directed outcome will give you a dopamine rise in pursuit of the reward. So let's say you're working on something, dopamine will rise so that you can attain this reward.
Okay.
Dopamine actually drops when you get that reward. But when it's unpredictable rewards, so let me text them and see if I get a text back, that's unpredictable. If you do get a text back, dopamine. Now, dopamine is a reward-based learning mechanism, so it teaches you that you should do that again to feel good. But it's a volatile kind of loop that you send yourself in of desperation. Let me check up, let me text, let me see if I will or won't I. Of course, some people are in relationships where they have to communicate with their ex, maybe they have children or
that comes up a lot.
Yes, but what my advice there is to limit that communication to just, logistics, picking up the child. And if your friend's great, but if you're not and you're suffering, wanting to communicate with them and checking up on them, checking up on what they're doing can actually be worse for that dopamine system, because it's not getting you out of that feeling of the grief. It's just keeping you stuck.
Yes.
So going cold turkey, unfortunately, is one of the best ways to do it, because your dopamine levels will stabilize eventually as you start to heal from the breakup, and finding ways to replace that dopamine in healthier ways. So exercise, hanging out with your friends, doing things that make you feel good, that are not, trying to get the reward from a text back.
Yes, so what you're saying there is to try and seek ways of getting healthy dopamine.
Exactly.
Because actually let's talk about healthy dopamine. Because does the brain and the body know the difference between healthy dopamine and not healthy dopamine?
Not really. Not really. And I sometimes get scrutinized online when I say real dopamine, but it's a metaphor. So the underlying rule for dopamine is that you want to put effort in for the reward. So what that means is if you grab social media versus exercising, social media will give you a much quicker boost, but it's quite volatile. It will drop very quickly as well.
Okay.
And that means that you need more and more and more to feel just as good. So because there's a depletion part where it has to replenish dopamine stores and then before it fires again. When you do something like exercise, or you work on a goal, or you decide to cook instead of order in, your dopamine levels rise in attainment of the reward, which is the outcome. And so they rise slowly and then they stay up for much longer. And then when they drop, it's more of like a curve rather than a plummet.
Wow, that's fantastic advice, actually, and that's good knowledge, because I didn't realise that distinction.
Yes.
So there is a distinction of actually how long those levels will stay maintained. Up. Okay.
Exactly.
Great advice. And I think that would be really useful advice for many people out there. Going back to how long those dopamine levels last. And you were saying about the going cold turkey on the texting. How long does it take for that impulse? This is going to be like the $1 million question. How long does it take for that impulse to wane, to not go searching for dopamine in inhospitable places?
I mean, I don't know if, like you said, it's $1 million question.
Yeah,
I don't have
a
number, but, you can improve dopaminergic activity within a few days to a week, so
Brilliant.
It depends. Depends on factors of how deep was the relationship, how traumatic was the relationship or the breakup, what's your involvement there. But interestingly enough, I actually have a friend, and I know so many people have done that, and I've done this before as well. So I'm not putting myself in a category that's different to the mundane person. But she would check up on her ex-boyfriend's new girlfriend even after they broke up. She got into this habit of just checking up on what she was doing. It became like an obsession. And it was like a habit loop that happened. And it was almost like she had to do this on a daily basis, even after they'd broken up. So they had broken up. And then the ex-boyfriend had also broken up with the new girlfriend, but she was still checking up on her about a year and a half later after their breakup.
Wow.
After not their breakup, the breakup of their breakup.
So not their own breakup, but the breakup of the ex-boyfriend and the ex-boyfriend's new girlfriend.
Yeah, because she'd got stuck in this habit loop of getting that dopamine from checking up on what she was doing. And so over time it became a habit loop. And what that shows us that dopamine is a reward-based learning activity. So if you know that you can feel good by getting dopamine through this activity, your brain's going to reinforce, this is what makes us feel good. Let's keep doing it.
Absolutely. So that trying to get that dopamine fix is the tarmac highway.
Yes.
For her.
Yes.
And for those people in similar situations.
Yes. But it doesn't make her feel good.
It doesn't make her feel good,
No.
but her body doesn't make the distinction,
No,
does it?
exactly.
It doesn't make the distinction.
Exactly.
It's a temporary fix.
Yes.
So what would help someone, I know you talk about the good things in your book, what would help someone move away from that dopamine fix? You talk about exercise.
Yes.
You also talked about creativity.
Yes.
And I loved your example of
Yes.
creativity.
Yes.
Do you want to talk a bit about that?
Yes. So I spoke about emotional expression and
Yes,
kind of
that's
channeling your feelings into something that can help you create.
Yeah.
When we create, we're dopaminergic, we increase serotonin, we increase levels of oxytocin. I spoke about George Michael, who wrote his album. What was it called? Oh, my goodness. Older, yes. And what's interesting about that album is that, you know, he lost his partner, he lost his mother to cancer as well. So it was a very, very dark time in his life. But even in that darkness, there were some songs that were upbeat and fun to show that you can feel both feelings in that grieving process. You know, it doesn't have to all be dark. And what he did is he started to shine light in his life again through honoring their lives. And he came out to the world as well about his sexuality, which was so, you know, amazing about the album. It's not only had he gone through this major grief, he'd also said to the world, well, yes, I had this secret lover who was a man for the last, you know, X amount of years, and I loved him.
And the growth there from a therapist's perspective.
Yeah.
Oh, the growth that he went through from that breakup, the emotional, no, what do you call it?
The emotional expression.
Emotional expression.
Yes.
But your own emotional expression of ballet.
Yes, yes. Because we need to channel this somewhere, you know. So it could be going down a rabbit hole of checking up on them, or it could be down a rabbit hole of improving yourself and making yourself feel good. For me, it was absorbing myself into a learning behavior that was ballet. I picked that up again, and it was perfect for my healing, because that's a dopaminergic activity in itself, and it's the best kind, because I'm learning something new that makes me feel good physically and mentally.
And the lasting effects of dopamine.
Yes, which, you know, stay up for a longer period of time rather than this kind of volatile, like, pew.
Yes, and that's what I wish more people knew.
Yeah.
And understood that. There was another part that I thought would be amazing for people to understand more, was the effect or the role of the amygdala.
Yes.
Just why we don't know enough about that in the general population. Do you want to just give a little bit of a explanation about the role of the amygdala?
Yes. The amygdala is your sort of fear processing center. It's responsible for emotional regulation. And when we go through a breakup, it's hyperactive. So it's responsible for detecting threats in the environment. So if it's hyperactive, it may communicate more threats than what the brain is supposed to perceive as a threat, because it's hyperactive and you're more easily triggered, more easily irritable. Now, lower levels of serotonin are going to exacerbate those feelings of obsessive thoughts, irritation, anxiety, which then with the overactive amygdala can, you know, have a sort of amplified effect on the brain. Now, there are ways to regulate that amygdala activity, and that is through things like walking, which actually deactivates the amygdala communication in the brain, lateral eye movements, which, you know, they would have done in EMDR therapy.
Yes,
Exactly.
which I do, yes.
Exactly. And you'll know that in goal-directed eye movement therapy, or eye movement,
Eye movement
desensitization, reprocessing.
Yes,
yes.
that's it. EMDR.
Yes, you're reprocessing the feelings and emotions without the fear processing involved. So you're talking about the thing in your life that's, you know, pertinent, but the amygdala is not active. It's less active.
So just through the process of walking.
Yes.
Say that again, because I loved that, and I really want people to understand that.
So let me just bring home the point. So when you walk,
yes,
the world is moving past you, and your eyes are stabilizing your eyes to keep looking forward, and there'll be some looking around as well. We call that optokinetic nystagmus. It basically is just your eyes wanting to pull to the images, but your eyes re-pulling it back. that is a type of lateral eye movement that activates the orbitofrontal cortex. When this part of the brain is active, it competes for resources with the amygdala. So they can't both be active at the same time.
Wow.
And what they've done in this research paper is they actually said, I think we just accidentally figured out how EMDR works. Because we always knew it worked, we just didn't understand the mechanisms, the neuroscience of why. And that's what's so amazing about this paper that came out in 2018, is that when you are doing your goal-directed eye movements in therapy, you're processing the feelings and the emotions and the trauma and the experience, but the fear processing center that says there's threat in our environment is deactivated. So you don't get this you get an emotional cathartic release, but not a fearful response.
Yes, so the fear response is reduced.
Exactly.
And we can come back to a place of regulation.
Exactly.
Fantastic. The Embody Lab is an online resource for embodied education, self-discovery and healing, founded by Dr. Scott Lyons, a renowned author and expert in holistic psychology and mind-body medicine. The Embody Lab is committed to making somatics and trauma healing accessible to everyone by offering virtual events, summits and certificates. The Embody Lab empowers individuals to embark on their own journey of personal growth and transformation through a diverse digital catalogue of programs and resources. Explore exclusive teachings from world-renowned experts like Gabor Mate, Bessel van der Kolk, Peter Levine, Diane Paul Heller and more. Join the Embody Lab community to deepen your healing path. I'm a huge fan of the Embody Lab, and just for you, I have a special code which gives you 10% off all of their courses, and that's Helen6788. The Embody Lab truly is a wonderful resource for your healing journey. And we were going to talk about oxytocin.
Yes.
Oxytocin and the beautiful bit you wrote about the bond, the connection bond of oxytocin after a breakup.
Yes, so after a breakup, they actually have seen higher levels of oxytocin in individuals that didn't want to break up. Now, the interesting thing about oxytocin is that it's actually responsible for wiring the brain. It increases our susceptibility to create new pathways. So in a way, you can use that to your advantage, because when we break up, most people, even if they did the breaking up, are going to feel an element of not wanting to be broken up regardless.
Loss.
You know, it's loss. Even though you know that that's what you want. This is a very classic feeling where someone will, not want to be in the relationship anymore, but still grieve. Yes. And they have this guilt because they're the one that did the breaking up. But you're still grieving something that you've lost. So there's something very beautiful in that. And that oxytocin actually can help us rewire our brain. So you can use that to your advantage to channel it into something else. Now, we feel oxytocin in other relationships. They need to be very deep, meaningful relationships. So not just a, oh, hello, goodbye. It's like when we hugged, I felt that kind of like real warmth. Yeah. And getting healthier levels of oxytocin again from the people around you, your loved ones, friends, laughter, feeling that social connection, and it can be romantic. And this is one of the reasons why people throw themselves into other relationships. It's because we're seeking that kind of oxytocin bond. Okay. Now, my only suggestion is that those relationships should be nurturing, not a sort of void filler. But ideally, you'd get it from friendships, loved ones, the people around you that care about you. Dogs, you can feel it from your animals, your pets. You got a cat.
So true. Dogs.
Okay, yeah. I've got 2 dogs, so I love cats as well. I'm both. I'm more of a dog person, but I love cats too. And so seeking that oxytocin from the people that you love is really going to help you boost the oxytocin, and oxytocin is responsible for rewiring your brain as well. It's one of the reasons why mothers feel so deeply connected to their babies when they're pregnant, but then fathers generally feel that when the baby comes. They don't have the same levels of oxytocin present in the brain until they physically see the baby and hold it, and then there's a huge surge.
So interesting.
Yes.
So interesting. Yes. As we move towards the end of the podcast, I just wanted to say and ask you if you had, as a neuroscientist, your top tips for someone to heal from heartbreak, what would they be?
Laughter.
Oh.
That's going to increase serotonin. You're probably going to be laughing with friends. If you're not and you're watching a comedy, that's perfect. You know, I had a post once where I said something like laugh it off, not in the sense of like laugh it off,
no.
but laugh it off.
Yes.
Immerse yourself in things that make you feel good, that make you want to giggle, and because that will help release serotonin
Brilliant.
and oxytocin with friends. Engaging in something that's going to give you a dopamine fix in a healthy way. Ideally a new hobby, something you can immerse yourself in. Maybe it's learning the guitar or drawing or painting, something you can express this emotional kind of cathartic release, and then hanging out with loved ones as much as possible. You know, everyone's different. Some people will want to hang out in groups. I'm probably the person who want to hang out with a couple of friends, but I have some very close friends. But it just whatever feeds your soul, but try not to go into that kind of ruminative thinking of wanting to fix it, because you can't fix that, you know, what happened. If you're dealing with the loss of a loved one, it's obviously different. You don't want to forget about the person you loved. You know, that's...
You mentioned that beautifully in the book, actually.
Exactly.
There's a beautiful section on that.
Thank you. It was so hard to try and get it all into one section. You know, how can you compare a breakup with the loss of a loved one? But, you know, so there'll be different outcomes in different scenarios. You know, with your ex, you probably don't want to remember them, but with a loved one, you do. So honor those emotions, and
Thank you for saying that. Great advice. My beautiful Instagram community sent some questions in for you today. It was very hard to choose some. The first one that I was going to ask you today was, does heartbreak have a long-term effect even after you're over somebody?
To some degree, yes, because your brain is a database of information of everything that it's ever experienced. So we have something called experience-dependent plasticity, which means that our brains shape according to what we've experienced in our lives. So a breakup is actually more of like a data point to say we've been through this, and then the brain can actually be really good at self-correcting and knowing what to do and what not to do in future occurrences, provided that you're breaking those patterns. So if you were maybe in a codependent relationship, ensuring that you're breaking that pattern of codependency so that you don't carry it on to the next one, you can actually use that codependent relationship as a database and information for what you don't want in the future, so you can grow from it. You can get better. You can say, this is what I've been through. I don't want that again. This is what I want my future to look like. And normally someone will be doing that with someone amazing as you, you know, to help them see what the possibilities of the future.
So really using visualization techniques.
Yes.
And I use that a lot in my own therapy.
Yes.
I think that was a good question, because I think a lot of people I picked up from Instagram were really struggling to get over people. And I know that also leans into some elements of unmet needs as well, which is much more therapy-based subject area, I know. But I think for some people that are taking a much longer time to get over someone is maybe to be a little bit curious about what the unmet need is underneath there. And to hold that with compassion.
Yes, absolutely.
You know, I think there needs to be a lot more compassion around heartbreak.
Yes.
And letting go of blame.
I've got goosebumps.
You know, you've been there, and it's just about that compassion to self hugely.
So, you know, we can anyone that's taking longer to heal from a breakup, I mean, they've said, you know, 3 to 18 months, 6 to 18 months. If you take longer, it's fine. You know, everybody's different. It's hard to really quantify how long it takes to get over a breakup.
It is so hard.
And some people will hold on to it. Maybe it was a horrible breakup. It was infidelity involved. But my advice is that, you know, the brain is very, very resilient. I don't think we give ourselves enough credit sometimes as to how resilient we actually are. So use that to your advantage. You know, take that and spin it and turn it into something that is helpful for you.
I love that, and it's about, to coin a phrase from Instagram, it's very much about being on your own side, isn't it? Caring for yourself like someone you care about. Yes. And it can make such a difference. And looking back at those unmet needs, I'm aware that, you know, attachment theory plays a big role in how we get over breakups. You know, someone with a insecure attachment style is going to struggle far more than someone that has the resources of a secure attachment. So it is very multi-layered, and it's hard to deconstruct in one simple answer, I know.
Yeah, but that's why, you know, therapy is so good, because you'll have someone that's helping you unpack all of this on an individualized level.
Of course. Choose You, my brand new book, is out now wherever you buy your books. And in line with today's episode, I have an entire chapter on letting go, which you may find useful if anything from the episode resonates for you. I guide you through why you may find it difficult, offer tools to help, include some reflective journal prompts, and have even written a beautiful letting go meditation for you. Choose You, out now. The last one I'll ask is, how do you stop the rumination of what ifs and the imagining a life that didn't exist?
That's very difficult, but what I will say is that we have an area of the brain called the default mode network. Now, the default mode network is actually a connection of brain areas that are responsible for mind wandering, that internal kind of state when you're washing the dishes, you're just not really thinking about anything, but you're thinking. Now, what happens in that default mode network is that thoughts are incohesive. They don't really have a beginning and an end. They're not a storyline that says from A to B, this is what's happening. They're just kind of running around. They're spontaneous.
They do.
Yes, you know, and that feeling of when you want to try and explain to someone how you're feeling, and then you go, I actually really struggling to explain, but it's still making me feel a particular way. That's our default mode network. Now, when you have to generate words by either talking to someone like you or journaling or giving it a story, it forces us to recruit different parts of the brain that reside within the frontal cortex. Now, the frontal cortex is responsible for logical reasoning, cognitively demanding tasks, can snap you out of that default mode type thinking so that you can then put what you're feeling into a narrative, into a story from beginning and end, so you can see it and you go, okay. And this is why healing from breakups, giving it a narrative, a story of what happened and how you're going to heal from it, can really help in grief, in loss.
Nicole, that's brilliant advice, because you're so right. You've hit it there perfectly. That we ruminate.
Yes,
it's a loop. It's so unhelpful, and the thoughts, and you know, someone could be sat in a coffee shop with a coffee, just going over and over.
Yes,
and not being able to break that thought process.
Yeah.
But if they actually had a cup of coffee, sitting in a coffee shop with a journal and wrote those thoughts out, you're right. They engage the prefrontal cortex.
Yes.
Things make more sense. I always refer to the prefrontal cortex, rightly or wrongly, as the parenting brain.
Yeah.
I always think it's just that, it's that part of your brain that brings the reasoning, the rationale, the understanding.
Yes.
And when we're ruminating, would I be right to say that not so much as a fear response, but it is a stress response, rumination?
Yes.
And our prefrontal cortex won't be working as optimally, will it?
No, it will be impaired. And that's why logic, reasoning can go out the window and you start to catastrophize.
Yes.
And then you try and argue with yourself, like, no, but this is a solution. And you go, no. It's better to go down this route, because the emotional brain wants to keep you safe. The amygdala's sole responsibility is to make sure that there's no threat in the environment. So it's hard to reason with yourself when you're in that type of thinking. So doing something like the physiological sigh, which we'll do together now. So it's an inhale through the nose, another one, pause at the top, and then long exhale through the mouth.
Okay.
So let's do two together. Okay. So let's do one more. I don't know about you, but I'm floating.
I think we should have done that at the beginning of the session.
Yes.
It's so relaxing.
Better late than never.
So relaxing to talk to, but that's so grounding, isn't it?
And that can help you alleviate those stress responses, or the stress chemicals, so that you can go into a parasympathetic state and then reason with yourself a bit better. Because your brain is not designed to reason with yourself in a stressful response. It's designed to run, fight, flight, or freeze. If there's a lion in your vicinity, you're not going to go, oh, why is there a lion here? You're going to probably run away from it. And that's kind of the same with when we're feeling that stress of rumination. You can't reason with yourself, so you have to regulate your central nervous system first and then come back. Now, journaling can help with that, or you can do the physiological sigh.
And I suppose also, I'm thinking with journaling, also talking to a friend.
Yes.
Is there anything that's telling a story?
Yes.
As opposed to being lost in your own thoughts.
Yes.
Nicole, so helpful. Thank you so much.
Thank you so
much. And I've got one last question, which I ask all my guests.
Yes.
To link back to my own book.
Yes, your book. I can't wait for it.
Thank you. Is, what does it mean to choose you?
So I have a big chapter on self-trust in my book. And I think when you've got self-trust, you've got self-confidence, if you've got your own back, you can choose yourself and you can go through with life knowing that you're standing true in your own alignment. Now, to choose me, it's to have those non-negotiables for me, and to stick to my own rules. You know, if I say I'm going to get up at 7 and go to the gym, then I need to go and do that because I made that promise to myself. Of course, that requires me to be realistic with my goals. I can't, you know, say I'm going to get up at 5:45 every day or 5:30 every day and go for a run, because it's just not going to happen.
Okay, realistic.
Yes, but I do like to get up at 6 o'clock. It's my time to get up, and I do, and I stick by it most days. Just keeping those promises to yourself so that you're choosing yourself.
I love that.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, Nicole, it's been so gorgeous to chat with you. What a beautiful, enriching conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. I can't wait for your book as well. It's going to be amazing.
And for everyone listening, Rewire is out now.
Yes.
Let's just
get it up.
I'd love to put it up. It's a beautiful colour. Actually, orange is one of my favourite colours,
Oh,
Nicole.
Good.
And you can see I've already marked so many pages, so many.
Oh, lovely.
And it's out now, available.
Yes. Everywhere. Amazon, Waterstones, Barnes and Noble, everywhere.
So as I said, it's a fantastic
Thank you.
book. I can't recommend it enough.
You.
So
That's
congratulations.
Very kind.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. It's so nice to meet you in real life.
Beautiful to meet you. Thank you.